something has gone seriously wrong at Sedgefield Country Club. With the Wyndham Championship just hours away from getting underway, the tournament that was supposed to deliver one final explosion of regular season drama has suddenly been hit by a stunning wave of superstar withdrawals. One name disappeared from the field, then another, then another. And before tournament officials could even process what was happening, 5 major names had walked away from the event. This wasn't supposed to happen. The Wyndham Championship is traditionally one of the most pressure-packed weeks on the PGA Tour calendar. For players fighting to secure their place in the FedEx Cup playoffs, every shot can determine whether their season continues or ends. But now, instead of headlines focusing on the stars arriving in Greensboro, the biggest story is about the stars who won't be there. But what do you think? Has the PGA Tour made the schedule too demanding for its biggest stars, or should these players still show up for the regular season finale? Drop your opinion in the comments and tell us your age and where you're watching from. And if you enjoy breaking down golf's biggest stories, subscribe to the channel. The timing makes the situation even more uncomfortable. The FedEx Cup playoffs are waiting just around the corner, meaning the players who have already secured their postseason positions have a powerful reason to protect their bodies, preserve their energy, and avoid unnecessary risk. But that explanation doesn't make the problem disappear, because when the biggest stars repeatedly decide that the final tournament of the regular season isn't worth the price of admission, the PGA Tour has to confront an uncomfortable reality. What happens when the event designed to close the regular season can no longer convince its biggest stars to show up? And this isn't just about 5 players missing one tournament. It's about what their decisions reveal about the future of the PGA Tour schedule. To understand how Sedgefield reached this point, we have to look at the 5 stars who pulled out and the very different reasons behind each decision. The first major piece of the puzzle is Daniel Berger. For Berger, this wasn't about chasing headlines or making a dramatic statement. It was about something much more important: protecting his body before the most demanding stretch of the season. And with the FedEx Cup playoffs approaching, the calculation becomes difficult to ignore. If Berger already has his post-season position secured, what exactly does he gain by putting his body through another exhausting week? One strong finish could improve his position, but one physical setback could potentially derail everything that comes afterward. That's the gamble. For a player still trying to protect his career and regain consistency, the smart move may not be chasing another start. It may be knowing when to step away, and that's what makes Berger's withdrawal significant. His decision represents the first version of the modern superstar dilemma. When the reward is limited but the physical risk is real, why take the risk at all? But Berger wasn't the only player making that calculation. But Berger's decision was only the beginning, because the next withdrawal would involve a completely different kind of player. And that's where the PGA Tour's problem gets much bigger. Then came Michael Thorbjornsen. His situation was completely different. Berger's decision was about experience and physical preservation. Thorbjornsen represents something much newer, a young player learning that professional golf isn't simply about playing every tournament you possibly can. For a rising star, momentum can be addictive. After a breakthrough performance and a demanding stretch of travel, competition, media obligations, practice, and recovery, the temptation is obvious. Why stop when everything appears to be going right? Why not immediately chase another victory? But that's precisely where schedule management becomes critical. A young player entering the most important post-season stretch of his career cannot afford to confuse momentum with endless energy. Golf may look slower than other professional sports, but the physical and mental demands accumulate quickly. Every flight adds fatigue. Every practice session takes energy. Every competitive round demands complete concentration. The next generation of stars may not feel obligated to play simply because a tournament has tradition behind it. They are beginning to think like modern athletes. Play less when necessary, recover properly, peak when the stakes are highest, and that philosophy becomes even more significant when you reach the biggest name on the list. But if a young player can afford to step away, what happens when the world's #1 player makes the same calculation? Then came Scottie Scheffler. This is where the withdrawal becomes impossible for the PGA Tour to ignore. Scheffler isn't an ordinary player deciding whether to enter one more tournament. He's the world's #1 player and one of the biggest forces in professional golf. When a player of that stature skips an event, the absence itself becomes a story. But from Scheffler's perspective, the decision is easy to understand. The FedEx Cup playoffs represent a completely different level of pressure, competition, and financial reward. Every tournament in that postseason carries enormous consequences, and the ultimate prize can reshape a player's entire season. Why spend 4 exhausting days competing in Greensboro when the real battle is waiting immediately afterward? Why risk fatigue? Why expose yourself to unnecessary injury? Why spend valuable preparation time on a tournament that may offer little additional benefit when your postseason position is already secure? For the average player, the Wyndham Championship can represent survival. For Scheffler, it can represent preparation. And that difference is enormous. The world's best player doesn't necessarily need another tournament to prove anything. He needs to arrive at the playoffs at full strength. His absence, therefore, sends a brutally simple message to the rest of the tour. If even the world's #1 player believes his energy is better spent preparing for the postseason, what exactly is keeping the other established stars in Greensboro? That question becomes even louder when another global superstar makes the same calculation. Then there's Rory McIlroy. McIlroy's relationship with the PGA Tour schedule has long been one of the most closely watched subjects in professional golf. Every tournament he plays or doesn't play can trigger debate, and his decision to skip Sedgefield fits into a broader trend, selectively choosing where his energy matters most. For McIlroy, the issue isn't simply whether he can physically play another tournament. Of course he can. Professional golf has become increasingly global. Players travel across countries, continents, and time zones while balancing regular tour events, major championships, international commitments, practice, media obligations, and recovery. Eventually, something has to give, and when a player like McIlroy looks at the calendar, the final weeks of the regular season may not carry the same urgency as the tournaments that follow. That creates a direct conflict between tradition and strategy. Tournament organizers want the biggest stars on the tee sheet. Fans want to see McIlroy compete. Sponsors want the exposure. But McIlroy's priority is ultimately performance. If reducing his schedule gives him a better chance to perform when the biggest trophies are available, then skipping one event becomes a strategic decision rather than a rejection of the tournament itself. And that distinction matters because when one superstar does it, it can be explained away. When multiple stars do it in the same week, it starts looking like a pattern. And then there's the most complicated absence of them all. Tiger Woods doesn't need an introduction. For decades, his name has represented the ultimate television attraction in golf. When Woods enters a tournament, the event immediately becomes bigger, more cameras follow him, more fans arrive, more attention surrounds every shot. But the Tiger Woods of today operates under a completely different reality. His schedule is extremely selective, shaped by the physical demands of competing at the highest level after years of serious injuries and surgeries. That means every tournament appearance matters. There is no longer an expectation that Woods will simply appear week after week throughout the regular season. Instead, his limited schedule is built around events where the competitive, historical, or personal significance justifies the physical cost, and that makes his absence from Sedgefield particularly powerful symbolically. If Tiger isn't there, casual fans notice. If Tiger isn't there alongside Scheffler and McIlroy, they notice even more. And when those absences arrive, alongside Berger and Thorbjornsen, the story stops being about individual scheduling decisions. Does the absence of these 5 stars show that the PGA Tour needs to rethink its schedule? Let us know in the comments and tell us which player you'll miss watching the most. Make sure to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss what happens next. 5 players, 5 different circumstances, but ultimately the same underlying calculation. Is this tournament worth spending valuable physical and mental energy when the biggest battles are still ahead? The 5 withdrawals didn't just change the leaderboard. They changed the entire business equation surrounding the Wyndham Championship. Bring the biggest names in golf together and the audience will follow. But suddenly that promise became much harder to deliver. When Daniel Berger withdrew, tournament officials could absorb the blow. When Michael Thorbjornsen followed, another piece of the promotional puzzle disappeared. Then Scottie Scheffler walked away. Rory McIlroy was absent, and Tiger Woods remained out of the field. Now, the problem wasn't one missing superstar, it was the accumulation. Every major withdrawal weakened the tournament's ability to build those highly anticipated marquee groups that television networks use to attract casual viewers. Instead of promoting superstar pairings and recognizable names, broadcasters were forced to redirect attention toward players who might be less familiar to the general sports audience. And that's a serious challenge because hardcore golf fans will watch competitive golf regardless of who's playing. The casual viewer is different. They often tune in because they recognize a name. They want to see Scheffler hunting another title. They want to watch McIlroy attack the leaderboard. They want to see whether a young star can break through. Take those names away, and the tournament suddenly has to convince viewers that the competition itself is enough. For sponsors, the situation is even more complicated. Companies don't simply attach their names to PGA Tour events because they love golf. They are buying exposure. They want their brands connected to massive audiences, recognizable athletes, corporate hospitality, and the cultural relevance that comes with hosting elite sporting competition. A star withdrawal doesn't necessarily destroy that value, but 5 of them at once can change the conversation. Buying tickets months in advance because you expect to watch some of golf's biggest stars compete at Sedgefield, only to discover that the players you came to see aren't going to be there. The tournament can still deliver world-class golf, the atmosphere can still be electric, and the competition for the FedEx Cup bubble can actually become more intense. But expectations have changed. The empty marquee groups become a visual reminder of the problem. The PGA Tour can promote the event. Broadcasters can build new storylines. Tournament officials can emphasize the playoff implications. But they can't manufacture the presence of players who have already decided to stay home. And that creates a difficult public relations problem for tour leadership. Officials have to defend the importance of the regular season finale without appearing to criticize players for making what are, from their perspective, completely rational career decisions. They can't realistically tell a player like Scheffler that protecting his body before the playoffs is irresponsible. They can't demand that McIlroy sacrifice his schedule for one tournament. And they certainly can't force Tiger Woods to compete. So the tour is caught in an uncomfortable position. It has created a schedule in which the playoffs carry enormous significance, and now the very players it wants to showcase are responding by protecting themselves for those playoffs. That's why the Wyndham Championship's problem is bigger than an empty tee sheet. The tournament isn't simply losing stars. It's exposing a weakness in the system. And once you look at the numbers, the reason these players can make that decision becomes even clearer. So why does this keep happening? Why would the PGA Tour build its regular season toward a dramatic finale, only to watch some of its biggest stars choose the sidelines before the final tournament even begins? The answer is buried inside the FedEx Cup system. The Wyndham Championship isn't simply another stop on the schedule. It represents the final opportunity for players to improve their FedEx Cup position before the postseason field is locked. For players hovering around the playoff cutoff, that makes Sedgefield incredibly important. But for players who are already safely positioned near the top of the standings, the equation is completely different, and that's where the incentive problem begins. A player sitting comfortably inside the top 30 or top 50, his playoff position is secure. He has already accumulated enough points to guarantee that his season will continue. Now look at the risks attached to playing one more tournament. So what does that player gain? Potentially more FedEx Cup points. But those additional points may have limited value if his playoff position is already strong. The downside, however, can be enormous. A minor injury could affect the playoffs, fatigue could hurt performance, and an unexpected poor result could provide little meaningful benefit compared with the physical cost of competing. That's the paradox. The players who need the Wyndham Championship the most are often the players with the least star power. The result is almost backwards. The tournament becomes increasingly important for players fighting for survival, while becoming increasingly optional for established stars. And that creates the perfect environment for withdrawals. Think about what the PGA Tour is asking its elite players to do. Play a long regular season, travel constantly, compete in major championships, manage signature events, protect your health, build enough FedEx Cup points to qualify for the postseason. When the biggest stars choose preparation over participation, the PGA Tour has to confront an uncomfortable question. Has its own schedule made the Wyndham Championship too easy for top players to skip? But their absence creates a massive opportunity for the players fighting to stay alive in the FedEx Cup race. With the biggest names missing, one underdog now has a chance to turn the empty spotlight into the biggest breakthrough of his career. So what do you think? Is this a crisis for the PGA Tour or an opportunity for a new star to emerge? Let us know in the comments. And if you want more updates and deep dives into the biggest stories in professional golf, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications, because the superstars may be sitting this one out. But the fight is just beginning.